that's an important thing for people to understand, is that like for you, whether it's your fitness, your business, or whatever it is you're trying to get to the next level, is like the first step is realizing like you've always got other levels you can grow to.
Nowadays it's one of these things where people will go, this is broke, and just park it and move. It's like me and my dad's relationship was shite. I was willing to park it, but then whenever I start putting work in, and I mean proper work where you're working on your own pace, you're not trying to work on the individual. You're like 5 meals a day. I would say I eat at least I must eat at least 13-14 veg a day. Like, I'm so concerned with macros. So like, for example, like every morning I'll wake up and like I'll fast most of the day, or fast until I'm ready, and then I'll have like a protein and literally as much veg as I can get in that first meal, and I just feel powered for the day. I need triggered to sit and stop and go, is this right? Do you know, somebody's going like, that your relationship looks like dog shit, and you're like, how dare you talk about that? But then you'll go home and you go, fuck, is it shit? And then
welcome to today's episode of the Shredder Show. Today we've got Tony Mcaleavey. It's a good pronunciation. Tony is infamous on Instagram, does some sick content. It provides a lot of educational value and a lot of mum jokes. Very knowledgeable in terms of training, mindset. It's also got its own sick podcast, and we've connected recently to Dubai. So today we're going to go through maximising fitness with mindset and some whatever topics we go through. First thing I want to talk about is something that actually came up for dinner when we went out to the Cheesecake Factory, the greatest restaurant in the world, the other night. Was you went for an event with John DiMartino that changed your life, which I'm now going to for this weekend. What happened to you on that?
Yeah, I think it's a good point to sort of touch on, because like it's one of these things where I wouldn't normally usually conversations when you first meet somebody, they go one of two ways. They're either very superficial, or you like, and me and you were automatically like going straight into mindset, and I was like, holy fuck, this is heavy straight away. It's like a conversation you wouldn't have normally. So it was nice, because then whenever I was like, you need to do this, I was like, I never like saying that because it sounds like I'm selling them, but like, because obviously it's not, like, it just made such a difference in my life. I really enjoy when somebody else gets something like that. Now you're probably going to go, that was terrible, but it made a really big difference for me. Yeah. So I went off a recommendation of a friend, just like you are, and I was like, I'm just going out of being nosy. I was like, I just want to see what this is. And for me at the time, I was firefighting, and it was in around £2,000, which was a full month's wages for me. So I was like, this has to be good. I was like, there's no way anybody in the world can charge £2,000 for a day and it'd be that good. And I went down, just sort of slightly apprehensive, and within 30 minutes he was talking about energy in the room and frequency. And then whenever I left, I was like, oh, I'm cult, I'm believer. Like, I was like, this man has sorted my life out in so many levels, and it's made a really big difference. Because and I'll be straight, me and my dad had quite a poor relationship. There was things going on in the background, and not that I need to give you all the details, but pretty much since then, me and him have a great relationship. And it's not that anything has overly changed. I've just changed my perspective of it, my viewpoints and what I do. So it's almost like, I would say, like super intense therapy maybe is like the better way to do it. Like imagine like a year of therapy in like a day, because you start at like 6 a.m. and you're not allowed to leave until you're done. And like done was like 4 a.m. So it was like, you're only allowed a 15-minute break, but it felt like minutes. You're gonna love it. You're gonna be so psyched.
And I think I sound like I have a fucking addiction problem, a load of issues now. Well, I have some, everyone has issues, right? And I think that's an important thing for people to understand, is that like for you, whether it's your fitness, your business, or whatever it is you're trying to get to the next level, is like the first step is realizing like you've always got other levels you can grow to. And I think one of the biggest things I see from a fitness perspective with guys struggling with is too much of an ego for asking for help, I think is a big problem. And I think psychologically people are now more pulled and triggered than ever, and I think it's more important that people try and deal and understand that how you think and feel is probably going to have the biggest impact on, well, it will have the biggest impact on your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best thing is to, like, say for example, I went to you for business mentoring, or you came to me. It doesn't mean I know more than you or you know more than me. It's getting an outside-in perspective on your business, which is really nice, because you can't see the cracks in your house when you're on the fucking inside of it. You can only see them whenever you take a step outside and go, what the fuck's going on there? And it's like, do you ever see these people that are in relationships and you're like, that's not going to work, but they don't see it? Or like something so obvious, you're like, how do they not get that? And sometimes it's like whenever I ask my mum for advice, or my sister, somebody completely external, that you're like, oh, they wouldn't, and they can just straight away put a dime straight on it. And I feel like that's what you're saying. It's like, it's asking for that, I think I always like rephrasing like the word help, because I go to therapy a bit, and I always rephrase the therapist as like a mindset coach, because everybody wants a mindset coach. Nobody wants a fucking therapist. Nobody wants help, but everybody likes an alternative view or a bit of advice, Joe. And I think it's almost manly, where you're like, I don't need no fucking help, like I can do this on myself. But as you said, you are the sort of fuel to your fucking progress, and it's one of the things where personally I found that the more that I've worked on that side, the more everything else is just falling into line. Like, I work less now and make more than I did whenever I slaughtered myself out of insecurities.
And it's interesting you say that in terms of insecurities, and I think also understanding your own psychology is important. So like, I know myself very well, and you listen to this should know yourself better than anyone else, is if I have a problem and I probably don't really want to deal with it, the only way I can deal with it is like to be put in a room, sat down and forced to deal with it with no other distractions. Otherwise I'll be like, oh, I've got to go and do this work over here somewhere, or I've got to go and do this, or I need to go and work out. And I think that's where confronting things head on is a big thing, and also you don't know if you don't try, or I think too many people are too hesitant to like put the cards on the table and just see what the crack is.
Do you feel like the reason that is, though, is sometimes that not just they're ignoring it, but they're ignoring it subconsciously? Like, I was really guilty of this, where I didn't realize there was issues or problems in any area, like relationship, family, until I actually took some downtime, and then you're like, oh, well, that's going fucking shit. And then you're like, oh, how have I not clicked? This has been like a year. And you're like, because you actually haven't slowed down or switched off. And I think that's probably the hardest thing to do, I think, is when you switch off and you get that like look from the outside. That's why the external viewpoint's really good. When somebody goes to you, how's your relationship going? And you go, alright. And then you actually go, how is it fucking going? And you're like, And then you need, you know what I mean? Or like, how's your downtime? And you're like, what downtime? And then I think that's nice, but you don't get enough of that, like asking questions. It's like when somebody asks you, how are you? And you're like, yeah, good. But it's like, how are you really, like on I think on each level. And then because if there's a chink in your armor, like if your love life's going great, and you're not going out with every single woman, you're going out with one or one man or whatever the fuck's going on, but everything it'll fuel you, whereas the minute that goes off, then everything else goes to shit as well. So it's just like all your pieces in your puzzle, whereas if you just ignore one, you can keep overcompensating on one side, but eventually it's like a Jenga tower, like all your blocks are fucked on this side and you built them all, it's gonna go like.
I think I see that a lot with men who are very driven, as they, and I would say I fell into that category, where you try and fill your voids with more successes and just driving and to the point where you're like, you suddenly realise like, what the fuck, like you've suddenly got like a massive, not issue, but an area over here of your life that's unfulfilled that you then need to deal with. Yeah,
do you know what I think's a really interesting one is me and somebody, we had this conversation the other day, and I think it's a case of like whenever you're insecure and you're a young lad, you're like, right, you don't realise it, but subconsciously like plugging this with more followers, more money, more muscle is going to be the cure to all my problems. And the thing is, see, when you tell somebody from the outside that like that won't solve your problems, they're like, bullshit. But the thing is, whenever you actually have it all and you go, I still have these fucking problems, you're like, well, at least I have some things in order now, which is good. But then you realise, and I think it's like that point where you hit and you go, I'm going to have to sort these, because plugging these holes with more followers, more money, more muscle is actually just not really helping me at all. It's making things worse. And I think that's, you have to almost come to it yourself. I think like that is like a
awakening.
Yeah, it's like wisdom with age almost. Because like if you had told me this 3 years ago, I'd been like, you're telling me another 150 grand in my bank account wouldn't help me right now. Shut the fuck up. It'd make me feel whereas now I'm like, it wouldn't really change much. But you tell somebody that doesn't have the money, and it almost sounds condescending.
One of the best books, I don't know if you've read it, is Stephen Bartlett's book, A Happy Sexy Millionaire. And have you read it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so when I read that, it really resonated with me. And there was a line that was like, when you got the tan, you got the abs, you got the Range Rover, you think you'll be happy and you won't. And I was like, fuck. Because like when I was maybe 7-8 years ago, that's what I perceived. Like when you've got that, you'll have fucking everything. But the reality is that that's a bit of like a vacant void that society wants you to think that you need to have. And I think the more you go down that rabbit hole, you realise that's unfulfilling, which is why it's important for people to then find what really fulfills them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody actually pinged me a question the other day, and it was it's like a friend of me, we go back and forth, and he said he had somebody on his podcast, and he goes, Joe, he always asks the same question. He goes, who's your hero? And somebody mentioned me, and I was like, well, firstly, I was like, he needs to get a better hero. And secondly, he goes, he just goes, out of curiosity, who's yours? Reply immediately who you think of. And the funniest thing is, I find that a really interesting question, because when I say who's your hero to you, like, don't say it now, but immediately somebody comes, and the funniest thing was, see, for me, it was like mum, sister, dad, and I was like, if you had asked me that 3 years ago, I would have been like The Rock, or I would have been just somebody that is like outrageously. I would have said somebody that's into motivation, up at 4 a.m. training.
Jocko Willink or something.
Yeah, somebody that's just a hardcore fuck. Whereas I was like, and then I sort of sat with that and was like, why did that come to the forefront of my mind? And I was like, because what I've struggled with the most over the last year or two is contentment. And I was like, who is the most content and happy individuals I know on a level? I was like, my mum, my sister, my dad. And I was like, they've got like, they're like most content I am is probably watching Bake Off with my mum on a Tuesday night when I'm home. Like, it's on right now, and I'm probably ripping them, missing it. Well, no, I am, but it's one of them things where I find it interesting that that's where the chink in my armor was for the last year and a half, and that's immediately where my hero went. Whereas it wasn't one of them hardcore people. I had to sit and think, like, why did they come first? And who popped into your mind? Was there anybody in particular?
This is really fucking weird that I'm going to say this. It was David Beckham, because I watched the David Beckham thing on Netflix, I think, last week, and my mum actually messaged me yesterday, being like, I watched it and it really reminded me of you. And I was like, that's really weird. And I was like, blonde hair. And I was like, he's good looking. I was like, maybe. And I was like, I was like, why? Fishing for like some ego like response. And she's like, oh, well, he's always busy and he's always on the move and doing stuff. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But what I actually liked watching that was the way he carried himself and the way he portrayed himself and the way he like looked after his family and stuff like that. I thought, like, I've always been someone to model other people's behaviour in terms of like a life that is congruent with you. And I think I watched that and I was like, fuck, the guy was like one of the best professional football players of his era, hugely successful now, and like owns a fucking football club, done loads of other cool shit, like, and he's also got like 2-3 kids of how many years, so like that's pretty impressive.
It's as you said, I think it's the mannerisms of the individual. Like, that's more so what I find you want to emulate. Like, whereas like it's the way he was speaking to the camera. It wasn't like, this documentary's about me, I'm big balls. It was just like calm, collected.
You've seen it?
Yeah, I've seen. I'm on near the last episode now, so you've caught me at the perfect time for this. But I think it's one of the things where for me it's like, I really admire that as you get older, and I've only really started copping on now as I'm turning 20. I'm turning 28. Is like, you just become a lot more settled in who you are. You don't feel the need to go out. Like, I would have had like this over sense of like fear of missing out on nights out now, and I actually struggle to get out now because I'm like, I'm not missing out on fuck all. If anything, I'm actually losing time. I'm like, give me a Kinder bar, give me a good show, and let me relax the fuck, and I'm content. I don't want to talk shit and shake hands for the 50th time. And I think it's really nice when you see that in a person, because you're like, I'm getting the real you. If you were to bump into him, you're getting the real him. You're not getting a facade. And I think that is a tricky one to watch when you meet people. It's not that there's anything wrong, but it's like, it's hard to peel people back, and I feel like that's why you probably were like, because he's just 100%. You're like, what's on the tin is what you get with him.
What I really liked that resonated was that I think one of the best years of his career, he was suffering with like severe depression. I think after like the Argentina thing, he got sent off and they were hanging fucking things of him, and he was like just crushing it, but no one knew of like what he was going through. I was like, that shows what the top level people are willing to like, can still do even when they don't feel like it. And it set an example to me of like, if you don't feel like it still means you can still perform at high level.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the things. I think whenever you watch something like that or you read a book, it always relates back to you, because you will relate it back to you. Like, for example, the first thing I thought about that is the amount of hate I get online, the amount of hate I get in my local areas, and I was like, well, if he can handle it from the entirety of England, I was like, I can handle it online. Like, he was actually getting death threats, and I was like, mine's not that bad. Yeah, it probably will be by the end of this podcast.
Enough howling.
Yeah, I was going to say no howling. Jesus Christ. But yeah, it's one of them things where like, that to me, I think you always relate it back to you, and it's interesting because like, even with like the hate and stuff, like, it's how it was dealt with over time, which is very. And do you know what I enjoy? It's not the fact of it didn't affect me, because it does. It's like how you managed it. It's like people who turn around and go, breakup didn't affect me, or my dad didn't affect me. I know it affected you, but what way did you cope with it? How did you handle it? And for me, I enjoy that side when people are like almost vulnerable with like, yeah, it fucking sucked, but I done X, Y, and Z, or I done fuck all, I just had to wait and sort of see through it. But that is doing something in itself.
What you said there was very interesting in terms of how things affect you, because I think a lot of things sometimes linger with us in our mind you don't realise. And I also think that what happens is that people then sometimes lead into some like addictions from that, whether it be like alcohol, drugs, women. We have like a lot of fitness clients who come to us with those types of issues, which I inherently have a very addictive personality, and I think you probably do as well. And for me, I've always just found that I have to just focus my addiction into positive, constructive addictions that can help me and help others, rather than going down like the wrong path, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's like really good example is like when my mum watches all my podcasts. I sound like a 12-year-old, but like she'll laugh at this. But pretty much my ones gave up smoking, and it's like when you give up one bad habit, if you don't replace that with a good habit, you're picking up a shitty habit. And I see my family, they all gave up, mum, dad, auntie, all gave up smoking at the one time, and they may as well have just picked up forks, because everybody got heavy as fuck really, really quick, and she's gonna fucking kill me for that, but that's the truth. It was like, swapping we're gonna swap cigarettes for loads of food, and like, whereas that's why you also see people who give up cigarettes and they become like Iron Man and all. It's like, I think it is in the personality. I think it's also like one of them things where if you struggle to switch off, it's like, I know rightly, people be like, I couldn't live without my business now. You would just end up picking up something else, as you said, whether it's good or bad or whatever it is. It's just I don't know if it's hardwired from birth, but it's probably all your insecurities.
It's filling a void, I think.
Yeah, over time, and it's one of them things where hopefully at some stage these voids are filled up. I'm gonna have a lot of hobbies, but yeah, I think it's just my brain ponders all that. You know, like whenever you ask me that, I'm like rotating. I think it's, as you said, you have to try and fuel yourself. You're gonna go somewhere. It's just, you may as well point where you're going rather than just going, life's just going to fuck me this direction. You may as well go, I may as well put it into making money, or put it into business, or put it into content, because there's always going to be something. Like, that's what my ones always say to me. They're like, once you stop this, there'll be something else. And I imagine, like, when I have kids or whatever, that'll be where my energy will go. And then it'll move again. Do you know what I mean? I imagine there'll be periods like that. I think the problem is a lot of people are too hard on themselves with that. They're like, I work too much. But what's the quality of your life like? What's the contentment like? Is there anything wrong with what you're doing? Because people be like, oh, I haven't taken a day off in 2 weeks. But I'm like, did you need to? Like,
did you want to?
Yeah. Are you enjoying things? It's like, I really enjoy filming content at the minute. Yesterday was the first day I got a bit of a mental block, and I was like, I'm not going to film. It's not that big of a deal. I filmed for like 2 weeks. It was great. Yesterday was a shit show. Today it's back to normal. Whereas I feel like a lot of it is the judgment we put in ourselves from the emotion or the action. It's like, me and you go for food after this. It's the judgment I put myself under from what I order to the pressure I put myself. Whereas it's like, it's just a bit of food. It's not that big of a deal. But to us, it feels like
everything.
Yeah, at that moment you're like, holy fuck. Whereas when you zone out, because one thing I love about home, and the reason I go home quite a lot is, sounds very depressing, but my bedroom window stares out at the biggest graveyard around our town, and every morning, every night when I go to bed, I see the graves, and whenever I take the dog for a walk, I go straight to the graveyard. I sound creepy as fuck, but it's constant reminder, like, I'm going in this 6 foot hole, like, I'm going up there. I'll be there. I've spent my whole life there. But the thing is, I find it really refreshing, because I'm like, it makes me like do stuff. It'll make me go, right, what matters more? And I'll send a lot of texts to people and go, what's going on in your life now? And I always notice the more I do that, the more calm things get. And it's even when shit does hit the fan with business, like, you know yourself, everything be going hunky dory, and then it's like, holy fuck, this shit's burning down around me. But then whenever I'm up there, I'm like, none of this really matters massively. I know that's not nice to say, but do you know what I mean?
I think one of the favourite things I said Alex Hormozy said was like, if you zoom out far enough, you can't see the Earth. And I was like, that's an interesting perspective of how fucking irrelevant everything is.
Yeah.
And I think when people listening to this are stressing about work, marriage, whatever, other than health, that's the most important thing. Because, and here's I think it's Brad Lee who said this, is like, would you rather have $10 million, or would you rather wake up tomorrow? Or would you prefer to wake up tomorrow?
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, then if you wake up tomorrow, then you should really appreciate that, because it's worth more than $10 million, right? Because when you think about it, it's like, fuck, that's a really interesting perspective, because I know I do it, and a lot of people do it, take too much for granted. And I think that is where people struggle with gratitude and also sometimes appreciating stuff.
Yeah, it's the reframing, like that DeMartini course I'll talk about. It's like, and don't know if you've listened to Mo Goddard. Yeah, he's really good. Like, he says, like, it takes 9 positive emotions to outweigh 1 negative. So like, for every time you feel jealousy, you need 9 reasons why you're not jealous of that person. So say I turn around and goes, fuck, Charlie's way bigger than me, and then I need to think of 9 reasons why I wouldn't swap my life for his. So I'd be like, I have a really good relationship with Mum, Joe, X, Y, and Z, and you list these out, and you eventually you feel like that scale of like jealousy. Instead of me being like, I want your life, it's like, oh no, I'll take mine. I like what I have. But if you don't reframe that constantly, everything starts to look better, because you're like, oh, he's this life, and then the next person you see, you reframe. Whereas if every time you get a wee bit jealous or comparison, because everybody does think like, oh fuck, it, like people can go, oh, I don't do that, but naturally, subconsciously, we do at times. And the more you reset that level, I feel like naturally now, whenever I remember going out for a meal with somebody, and I'll not say who, in Spain, and we went out a couple of times, and every time there was something wrong with the food for him, whether it was too small, it was too dear. The steak was undercooked once, then it was too small, it was too dear. And whereas I was immediately like, if the food's shit, the crack, like
I hate to have the conversation with who I'm with, right?
Yeah,
or
tell me the drink's good. You know, like we went to out last night for food, and one of the side dishes was wank. But like the thing is, the drink was great, and all I was like, oh, taste this, and it's just like naturally I was doing that without realizing it, because I'm not trying to frame the positive and hype things up. It's just the more you hardwire and the more you reframe that, and it's tough at the start. But it's like, list 3 things you're grateful for, and people struggle to write them down. It always has to be different things. But the more you do it, naturally, the better you get it, the more you hardwire it in yourself. That's why gratitude lists, although they sound airy-fairy, they do naturally make you feel better. Like if you're feeling like shit and you're crying from a breakup, or your head's minced, your business is going, writing a list of what's actually good in your life, or what you're grateful for, at least, will at least give you some sort of like, oh, well, at least I've got my mum in my life, or my dad. You know, people don't get that at all.
I think to do with actually 2 of the things that I do that help me a lot is, one, I write my goals out in present tense as if I've already achieved them, and then the other one is like what I'm grateful for, to then give like each end of this perspective. And I say for anyone who wants to be successful or achieve anything, because if you want to be in the top 1% of people in the world, all you have to do is literally write down your goals. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, because it's reframing, it's hardwiring yourself. A lot of people will also be like, oh, I don't know, but it's like, you need to do it and do it consistently for time, and then you're like, oh, this isn't bullshit, this works. It's like, some people don't like the cold showers and stuff. See, for me, it's not about the benefits of whatever inflammation. It's just, I just get a kick out of doing something that requires discipline. So even the fact of you're willing to write it down every day, make the 5 minutes, that discipline then links into something else in your life, and it's like a
compound.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the reason, like, you notice fitness coaches do quite well with businesses, because they've got this thing where they've got the villain arc. Somebody breaks up with them, and then they go from fat to super fit and lean. They realize for the first time in their life that hard work actually pays off. So then they go into business.
Who would have thought it?
I know, exactly. And then it's like, right, well, if I do this, I'll do it with business. Whereas if you do it with personal development, the funniest thing is, when you do it with that lights everything up so much better. Like your sex life, your home life, everything becomes better, and then that fuels you. Because, like, for example, a lot of people that don't have the personal development side, I find that, as you said, the hide and work. Versus I've noticed I've made more money, I've worked less, I'm less stressed now, because I really enjoy my home life with the stuff that I worked on with my dad. I want to take time off, because that lights me up, and then it fuels me like a positive feedback loop. Whereas if I overwork and don't take time off, I do shit at work, and you just end up in this burnout cycle of just muck. Whereas, you know yourself, you go to take a walk, and you're like, I don't need a walk, I'm so fucking busy. But I love that. I was listening to that podcast the other day. It was one of Stephen Bartlett's, and I was like, when have you ever went for a walk and went, I really regret that walk?
That's like, a fair point, yeah.
Like, never, because you just get headspace. And I went to a mindset coach before, and he said your best ideas come when you... He spent years with writer's block, and I found this very interesting. So he spent years in France trying to become a writer, and he said, and I couldn't do it. He was like, I used to go to a cafe, real good pen, sit down, primed, and just get writer's block. And he goes, the reason you get writer's block is he spent so much time researching it, because he was like, why do I have so much writer's block? And he found out that, and I find this so interesting, is your most creativity will come when your subconscious mind is free to flow, but you're semi-conscious. So this is why, for example, when you move your arms and your legs and you're walking, you get better ideas. Or whenever you're in very small conversations, or when you're driving, you're doing enough that you're occupied, that you have to...
It almost lets your subconscious just go.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, that makes so much sense, because I get all my best thoughts like in the shower, walking, driving. And when you say it to other people, they're like, yeah, so do I. And I'm like, yeah, it's not because you're special, it's not because I'm special, the shower's special, it's because it's just occupying you enough. Whereas if you sit down, sometimes you don't get it.
You're forcing the scenario.
It's not interesting.
I'll give you a really weird situation which started to happen to me. Maybe I'm not training hard enough. It seems to be like the middle of the set, like seventh to eighth rep, I go like, it's a really fucking great idea, like when I'm in the middle of a fucking row or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, shit, I need to write that down.
It's because you're in flow. It's like you're taking a break. See, it's because you probably work all the time and then that's your downtime. So then your body's actually free to, it doesn't feel under pressure because you know that you're not having to, I don't have to message this person, I don't do this. It's free to go into the sets, come out of them, and just free flow because you probably came up with a bit of the idea during the rest and then it's flowed in. That happens to me, but it's like what do you call that? Like when an epiphany moment.
Yeah.
And it's like whenever somebody's talking, you're like, I'm getting light bulbs. It's like, fuck, this is fire. But I find it really interesting because like that creativity is like so hard to get, especially whenever you're for your business, because it helps you your next move. And you know yourself, like coaches in particular, like the main issue of the business is the coaches themselves, because they're, without sounding cheeky, they're like me and you. We're idiots at times. It's just not being smart and not treating the business like a business owner, whereas the creative energy is probably the most important thing because you can look in, make decisions, and that helps you scale so much.
I think the same thing when it comes to people with getting in shape is they often lack the ability to actually think clearly about what they're doing, because I think too many people like don't actually think about what they're doing and why. They're literally just doing for the sake of doing. Like you see the same person go to the gym for like 10, 15 years, do the same thing over again and look exactly the same. And I think a lot of people lack the ability to think critically, like if this isn't working, maybe you should look at doing something else or changing something or asking someone for help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like whenever people go, I think one of the things that I find really interesting now as well is like a lot of it, because I've done quite a lot of work on the personal development side and the relationships and family life and business. I find that like nowadays it's one of these things where people will go, this is broke, and just park it and move. It's like me and my dad's relationship was shite. I was willing to park it, but then whenever I start putting work in, and I mean proper work where you're working on your own pace, you're not trying to work on the individual, you're like, how do I frame my perception of this situation and change and play around? You notice shit start to get better, and it's because you haven't went, it's like a lot of the time you see relationships break down now, whereas they wouldn't 20 years ago, because when you got married 20 years ago, if you got fucking divorced, it was a different ball game. It was like, we're in this together, we're going to work for it. Whereas now it's like, the door's always sort of cracked. Because, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not always cracked. I believe, like, if you're married, you're locked in. I'm not saying that to anybody. I get married in the future, don't hold this against me. But you get where I'm coming from. It's like, it's much easier to get out now. Whereas before it was like, I have no choice but to make this work. It's like relationships where people don't put titles on it. It's like, I'm not putting a title on this because I'm ready to leave at any time point.
Do you think that is almost why some people shouldn't get married? It's a different subject, because if you're not married, any person could fuck off at any point, and then it also puts them in a position where they both have to make an effort to make it work because there's not anything connecting you. And I say that as someone who's divorced, but
yeah, no, that's interesting. I think it's very interesting. Like, it's like saying if you have to work together or should work together, what works better? I don't know. I think sometimes, like, I'm a bit of a meathead. I'm like, well, if I'm in, I'm going to work harder that way. So for me, it's like
commitment, all in.
Yeah, it's like whenever I was firefighting, like when I was running in the burning building, I wasn't going, I'm maybe sort of going in here. I was like, I'm going fully in, so I may as well fucking go for it. And I found that everything in life, if you don't go, like, it takes just as much time to put in 50% as it does 100. So for me, I'd rather, even from a mental standpoint, I'd be like, I gave that everything and it didn't work, then I can go and park it. But 9 times out of 10, if you give it everything, it usually fucking works, like, which is the frustrating thing. It's like if you'd have seen the way our family life was before, and then you see the stuff I put on Instagram, and I say this, and people are like, nah, this is bullshit. I'm like, if you saw what it was like 5 years ago, and I'm like, but like, if there's any issues in our house, you're fucking brought into our conservatory and you're sat down, it's a fucking full-scale intervention because you've left a fucking plate in the sink. And it's one of them things where everything is snipped because molehills have been made in the mountains over time, so it's like anything. And then you calling somebody on something, it's like, it's well sorted, but it's like, there's been so much shitty work put in there. But it's the same with like a good relationship, a good business. It's like the ground shitty work day on day. It's like posting content every day for years, and then you go viral and people are like,
just one post.
He's always had it. He's always been really good at content. Suck the back of them, lads. It's just one of them things. It's the same with the family life, because people go to me, I wish I had that relationship you have with your ones, and I'm like, trust me, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it in the end. I'd rather put my energy into that than park it and go, this is shit. It's the same with the work, the business. A lot of people tend to go, I'm just shit at content. No, you're just shit at practicing and being disciplined with it.
Or actually knowing what you're teaching.
Exactly. Bang on. Like if you're like, oh well, I don't know if I should post this because it's right. Go learn, and then that builds your confidence. It's like anybody who argues against me of one of my posts, which happens literally all the time. I'm like, I have solid understanding of this topic, and if you aren't a moron, you can see my viewpoint. And I can see yours. Doesn't mean either of us is, because you know yourself, coaching's all sort of opinion based.
Yes, perceptions, right?
Yeah, like you could go high volume, I could go low volume, and we get the same result with somebody else. It's not like
it's personal preference.
Mine's better. It's just like, yeah, sweet.
But Arnold did this.
Yeah. Oh, fuck off. Like, see if I see another fucking. Oh, I give abuse to that all the time, and then everybody comes at me with Frank Cian and Tom Platt's comments, and my Instagram's just full of them. But yeah, I find it interesting. I find that whole. The hard work thing, obviously it's basic, but like you don't realise it.
One of the things I think is talking about, if anyone from the fitness side of things listens to this, is talking about like food addiction and having a healthy relationship with food. You, having been in touch with you here and seen what you've been eating recently, seem to have a very good relationship in terms of eating a lot of ice cream and eating out and eating 10,000 calorie croissants. I have also eaten, I think I ate half a croissant. It's fucking great.
Oh, so good.
Like, so for anyone for context listening to this, there's a place in Dubai, I can't remember what it's called, that does like
Bohox or
yeah, something like that. Boho?
I think it's Bohox. It's beside them all.
It's banging. But like they get a giant croissant, and it literally is like. But you'd think it'd be shit, but it tastes great.
So good. It's so addictive.
How do you structure that in terms of your nutrition? In terms of eating that in with what you're doing, or is it just on an ad hoc basis and just pulling calories from everywhere else? And do you get what like a lot of trainers do, which is a bad relationship with food sometimes with that?
Yeah, like see for me personally, I'll be blunt. I done a show in like the end of April, and I think personally for me, and I would say 90% of people who compete probably shouldn't compete, and I think a lot of people will be like, ugh. But see if you get triggered by that when I say that, you're probably the person who shouldn't compete. Whereas you should be like, yeah, I get that, because for me. I probably will end up doing it again like a moron, but it's not for me.
And so will I, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we said this the other day.
It's not for me. I'm just a moron. So the thing is, I got bad food relationship off it, struggled with body image. I got really good discipline though. So like, there's pros and cons. Like I can't sleep past 5:30, 6 a.m. now. Like I put up a story every day, me doing press. I was like a lunatic, and it's one of these things where there's like everything. It's got pros and cons, but with the food relationship side of things. I'm just I like the words healthy now. Like I sit in 3,500 calories a minute. I'm slowly building up, but like I probably have like 5 meals a day. I would say I eat at least I must eat at least 13, 14 veg a day. Like I'm so concerned with macros. So like for example, like every morning I'll wake up and like I'll fast most of the day, or fast until I'm ready, and then I'll have like a protein and literally as much veg as I can get in that first meal, and I just feel powered for the day. Don't know whether that's just like subconscious or what, but it's like every meal must have protein and fruit or veg, and then you can load up the rest, and it's just naturally like that. And then whenever it comes to the one meal off, I'm almost like it's one meal, and like on the day I go and have a 10,000 calorie croissant or whatever the meal is, or like last night I went out for like a Chinese and I had a drink. I don't be like, oh my god, I need to bank calories. I'm like, I'll roughly call this, because I've been doing it so long, I'm not prepping for a show, and I feel like a lot of people stay in this forever eternal where like I challenge you, if you're addicted to tracking, to take a little bit of time off tracking and see what happens. And the thing is, what naturally happens is if you're a tuned in individual, you can start calling it like you're like, right, I'm gaining weight, I'll probably stop having fucking kinder at night like a fat cunt. Versus sometimes I find, for me personally, the more I'm restricted, the more I want something. Do you know what I mean?
I'll give the same example this I had in a podcast earlier, is for me in terms of work. So like I get to the point where maybe at the moment I'm a bit burnt out, I don't really want to work. If tomorrow I say you're not allowed to work, what's the first thing I want to do?
Oh, straight away.
I want to work. I'm like, I want to go like look at my fucking ad account or do whatever. I want to look at the Facebook groups. Like you're getting pulled back in because psychologically I'm not allowed to do it. And I think that's just understanding your own human nature, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of them things where like, even just with the restriction around that, like I think a lot of people think like, what's he doing this? But at the same time, like, yes, my weight might go up the next day. Like I think I spiked like 2 kilos off the croissant, but like it went down a kilo the next day, and I just naturally ate less because I felt like fat.
Yeah, you just don't want to eat, do you?
Yeah, I just felt shit because I had this massive croissant of like 10,000 calories with loads of Nutella, and I spread it all over it. But you just naturally rebalance. Whereas like if I go into this hardcore restriction again, it just creates that shitty binge like cycle you get when you're 16 and you're fucking eating tubs of Kinder and Nutella and all. But it's, yeah, for me, I just pride myself on like I eat healthy and then I track calories most of the time. I try and take the pressure off, because I think what is good for me long term, and the more I look at it, see, the more you over stress about it all, it just takes away any enjoyment from it. And like, the whole point of it is fitness. For me, I always stick with the idea that fitness should complement your life, not complicate it. And for a long time period, as much as I'll say it didn't complement my life, it complicated it, I made sure it did, because I was so paranoid of getting results. But the funny thing is, the results take a fucking lifetime anyway, so you may as well have a bit of a downtime, because you'll work harder during your power periods. Do you know what I mean? I find that it's more so it complicates other people in your life as well. You start to become very reclusive. That's the key word. Like, you don't want to go out because you want to stay at home and eat your food. You don't want to like socialize. You become a hermit, right? Do you know what's a really key sign? And some people will get this if you've prepped. You will, when you start wanting to eat your food alone and by yourself, and in your, like, I've had a car. Yeah, like, for example, really good example is like, every night when I was prepping, like, I would save up like calories for oats and dark chocolate and peanut butter and strawberries. Like, it was my thing. And like, if you talked to me during that meal, I'd fucking rip your head off, because it's like, it felt like the only. Whereas that's not the way that should be. And like, I noticed that if I was in the house, I would almost be like, I want to take this to my room. That's like, Joe, if you imagine, you relate that back to caveman days, it's like you taking your food away from everyone else naturally, because you're like, I don't want anybody steal this. You steal it or see me, and that's whenever you're like, it's like Gollum with the ring in the Lord of the Rings, right? Yeah, except I probably look worse than Gollum at that stage, probably skinnier and less muscle. But it's interesting, because then I didn't notice it at the time, but looking back, I'm like, that's not healthy. Like, you're made to eat as a group, a community, and then you separate yourself. It's like couples who go to bed at different time periods are shown to break up. Where like, more chance of breakup. It's couples that don't eat together, families that don't eat together. It's like, when I was in the fire service, it's like, I remember eating my lunch one day by myself, like, and they were like, you don't do that, like, that, no, like, what the fuck is going on here? And I was like, what do you mean? I'm just having a sandwich. And they were like, we eat together. And it's just like, that's the standard, and I actually really respect that. Like, whenever I'm home now, even if I'm eating different meals, eat at the same time. I think stuff like that's really key for your food relationship, because then it relates that it's not just about the food. It's about conversation. It's about the people around the table, and I think that is a really hit home point. And whenever food starts complicating, like, my family go, we're going out for a meal, and I'm like, fuck, my head goes to calories, and I'm like, fuck, do I have the calories for this? I'm like, I'm like, dial off, and I'll not binge, I'll not go over, I'll go out for the meal, make a smart decision, a little bit over, not a stress, pull calories the next day, relax, don't do an extra 20 minutes cardio if you need to, relax, take the fucking pressure off. The main problem is just, I think people put, like, I'm so guilty of, I'm sorry, we just put this judgmental pressure on ourselves. Guilt, that's the word I use. Like, yeah, like, and the thing is, like, it's funny, because I'll do this right now, and I'll go out for food tomorrow, and I'll be in my head, I'll be like, how many calories is that? Naturally, but the thing is, it's just, like, I'm almost getting a stress relief saying this, like, it's like, it doesn't matter, like, none of it. I know that sounds, but it's release. And then the thing is, you work better, you eat better off that. Like, whenever I'm no pressure with the food, I naturally just eat better. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, you're not forcing the situation, right? And it's, everyone listening to this, you're a fucking responsible adult, you know that, like, should you eat the fucking 10,000 calorie croissant, or should you just eat, like, the steak and vegetables and rice? Like, we went to Cheesecake Factory, right? So, like, I think we all had the same thing, like filet mignon, I had rice and asparagus. Yeah. Like, I could go and have a cheesecake and the quesadillas and all the other good shit that I want to have, or there's a sensible option you can eat. Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, one of the key things is, like, a really good way to frame that last point as well is, like, when it feels like pressure and you have to force it, it's not usually a fart, it's usually shit. I know that sounds terrible, but it's a really good idea, because it's like, when you go on a date and you put that much pressure on the date that you want it to go well, it's gonna go completely shit. Whereas any date I've been on where I'm more relaxed and I don't give two fucks, the connection's better, I flow better, everything moves really well. It's like, when you put that, what's the word, you put that expectation on what it should be like, and that pressure, but you feel it in your stomach, then it crushes you, right? Because you can't be who you are, or genuine. No, you come across almost in every word. It's like, I see it a lot of the time, and I'm sure you do too, with content. You see people who are being who they're not, if that makes sense. So, like, to be transparent, I wasn't sure if I liked you before because I was seeing your content, because it's like, that's not really my thing. And then when we met, I was like, that's just who he is. And I could see it straight away, and I knew what it was. But from an outside, I was like, I'm not sure, like, who this guy is. You wouldn't make, like, when people see this podcast, they'll be like, how did that happen? Because it will come across like two external people completely. Whereas the thing is, people forget that, like, like, it's not that I'm a different person on camera. It's like you'll see hints of that in this podcast.
Yeah, and I see it in your personality in conversation when we go for dinner, right? Like, shit will come up, and I'm like, I see it. Where it's like, if I say, for example, if like I was to try and do your type of content, it wouldn't fucking work, because I'm a very like logical, serious person. So it's not like I'm not going to make mum jokes and all that type of shit all the time. So it's like,
no, exactly. It's I find it, whereas vice versa, it's like, but it takes some time to get used to that, because you see somebody get success with one line, and you see everybody
starts doing it.
I see a lot of people like using mom jokes. Like, don't get me wrong, I didn't invent the mom jokes, but it's like one of them things where like, or they're calling themselves names in the third person. I'm like, I can tell what yous are doing, and I don't really care. But the thing is, it's like, it actually, I'm like this watching it going, oh, and then I get people sent me my DMs, and I'm like, I'm not the only person thinking that. And then it just comes across as inauthentic, and then I think then you can end up losing yourself in that too. Do you know what I mean? Like, see, for a long time I was
people
like,
lose their own fucking identity. That's the problem, because they're becoming a shit version of you rather than the greatest version of themselves. And that's the reality, is like, everyone listens to this, your goal should be the greatest version of you, not like a shit version of Tony.
It's because
or a shit version of Charlie.
Yeah, do you know what I think it is? I think a lot of it's because you're money focused rather than mission or vision focused, and that sounds wishy-washy, but it's not. It's like, whenever I got really clear on like my mission and my vision and my values, I found that content just flowed, because I was like, I'm being very serious, it's all research based, and I was like, yeah, I am a bit of a dweeb with the research, you know yourself, biomechanics, love it all, like all that geeky stuff, but at the same time I am 100% a messer, and I will be like a complete, like, just take the piss out of everything. You'll hear the words that come out of my mouth, you're like, what is going on? And I was like, that's who I am, that needs to come across, and if you don't like me, you don't like me, because whenever you meet me in person, people are going, fuck, you're very different to your content, whereas people are like, now, you're different, but I know where that comes from.
Yeah, you can see the personality, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the key, whereas, as you say, I love that, like, you don't know where you're at, but like, my mission is pretty much to help a younger version of myself. I think a lot of people's will be like that. The younger version that was coming out of uni that took drugs, couldn't get a woman to save his life, still can't, and it's one of these things where they struggled on all areas with confidence. So I want to, and then at 24, now I'm 28, I want to help the 24-year-old version of me. So that's why I'm focusing more on mindset, personal development, issues on that side. And that's naturally where I do. So I speak, whenever I'm speaking content, and I go, you silly bastard, I'm not speaking to you, I'm speaking to me 4 years ago, because there's somebody out there that needs to hear exactly the tone I say it, because I would need somebody to shake me and go, you're thick as fuck, you are a moron, and then me go, no, I'm not, and I almost get triggered by it enough to go,
think,
fuck, he's right. I need triggered to sit and stop and go, is this right? Do you know if somebody's going like, that your relationship looks like dog shit, and you're like, how dare you talk about that? But then you'll go home and you go, fuck, is it shit? And then the way it's clicking, you thank yourself for it. It's like the people who tell you the harsh truth. That's what I want. I want people just to be boom. That's what it is.
You said something there which is like the whole mission of what I do and who I'm trying to become, and it's the man I needed to be 5 years ago.
Yeah,
for myself.
I
To
love
then
that
be
though.
that for other people. But I like Yusuf, who was on the podcast before, that said that I am that person to him, and it's me, that's my mission, is helping other people in that respect, because the challenges I've had, the problems you've had, at the time I didn't really have anyone who could help me with some of the issues I had, and that's where I think about trying to build myself into the type of person who has so much value, can help those people. That's my mission. That's why I'm going to the John DeMartini thing. That's why I'm trying to dig into all the flaws of who I have, because that's when you can become the all-rounded greatest version of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things where, like, I said that to Adam, I was like, fuck, he's on it, because I've told loads of people about DeMartini. Very few have booked. And I'm always like, when somebody books, I'm like, you're on my wavelength, because I remember getting told on the Monday about it, and like the person messaged me the next day going, how'd you find last night, because we had cooked food and stuff, and I was like, yeah, unreal. I was like, I'm going to DeMartini in like a month, and he was like, sweet mother of Christ, and it was pretty much like, you're a lunatic, and I was like, yes I am, and then whenever you booked it, I was like, you're a lunatic, I'd enjoy this, and I was like, that's the sort of people I want to be around, because then there's that idea of like, you go to that, and you'll get a different viewpoint, you'll come back, talk to me about it, and I'll get value from what you tell me, because you'll have picked it up completely different to how I picked it up.
Perspective.
Yeah, and you'll not be afraid to share. And I just find the more you give in that sense, the more you get, especially with the personal development. As you said, the 5 year younger thing, you're just looking to pick up them small percentages, and that's why I think a lot of people in like game start to get like bashing heads, because they're like, there's not enough room for everyone. But like, you now wouldn't speak to a 5 year younger version of me, and vice versa. Like you're 5 year younger, you wouldn't. You'd be
Our
like,
5 years younger version of each us would fucking hate each other.
yeah, exactly. And I find that very interesting because you obviously evolve, and I think that's why you consistently have to keep focusing on that, because as you have children, as I have children, or as the family life moves, you get married, you'll change, and then you'll want to give advice to yourself just married or just with kids, because you'll be like, fuck, I wish I knew this, or I wish I was doing this, I wish I prioritized this. So it's like passing it down, because like I always find that I always get the best advice from my mum, my dad, my sister, that are just slightly ahead, not in terms of business or success, but just ahead of life, because
Life experience.
wisdom comes with age, and it's not a case of they know more, it's the fucked up more. So you're getting the juice. It's like, do you know, whenever somebody's walking in front of you and they fall and they trip over a curb, you're like, well, I'm not going to trip on that curb. Do you know what I mean? It's literally that simple, but it's like, we can be very apprehensive, and I think some people are very apprehensive with taking advice from people that aren't financially better or aren't this, but sometimes the best advice is from somebody that's not
To do with what you're doing.
Yeah, sometimes, not always the case. Like, I wouldn't take business advice from somebody that's fucking skint as fuck, but they can give
Or fitness advice for someone who's really out of shape.
yeah, exactly. Like, I think you have to walk the walk, but like, if I want contentment or family advice, I'm like,
Oh, it's a different game.
yeah, exactly. And it's one of them things where like, it's sometimes nice. Like, I get some of the best business advice from my sister because she's target demographic, so like that makes sense. So it's just one of them things where you also have to take in advice, and I think a lot of people also need to remember that you do need to be careful. I think this is a caveat to this, and this is nice, is even with us, is no advice is gospel. And I think a lot of your answers are internal, and it's nice to sometimes vent. Like, one of the weirdest things I do, and my mum always knows that I'm overthinking, or my sister, because there'll be a load of deleted messages on WhatsApp, and they're like, what the fuck's this boy at like 4 a.m? But I'll voice note them as if I'm talking to them, and then I'll delete the message usually if I get the answer. Do you know how you can talk yourself round? You're just venting. Because like, sometimes I go on and I just vent, and it's not like a rant or anything, you're just talking through it, and then you're like, oh no, that's my answer. I'm like, that's it. And I'm like, you don't even need to hear this is 5 minutes of shit. But I find that a lot of people will go external, and then what they like to do is they like to put that, I don't know where the quote comes from, I'm not sure, maybe you know, but it's like, I mean, it might be Jordan Peterson or it might be somebody else. It's like, one of the saddest days in like a man's life is when they realise that like their dad doesn't know all the answers or their mum doesn't, because that's the stage where you have two choices. I think it's Jordan Peterson. You either pretend they do and continue to ask them questions and let them guide you, or you go, they know just as fuck all as I do, and you start taking ownership for it, because you're like, they're just winging it. And I find that very relieving, because I'm like, whenever a kid does come to me, or somebody comes to me younger, like, I don't have it all figured out, I'm just giving my best advice
That you have right now.
that's all I have right now, and it's one of them things where like, that can be wrong, that can be right, I'm giving whatever I feel is key. But I think a lot of people, I would have done this, and I guarantee, maybe you wouldn't, but I would have been like, give me advice and I'll do that, because then subconsciously when it goes wrong,
It's your fault, yeah.
I can blame you. It's like whenever people go away for relationship advice, now there's getting a viewpoint, and that's fine, but like, turn around to somebody going, what do you think I should do? That is literally just going, here's the driving wheel, here's everything to do with my life, you just pick the direction, and that person can go, right, we're going in a fucking wall, baby, that's where we're going. And it's you'll be happy with that, because the pressure's not me to make the decision. And I feel like that happens because we're lost with like taking, not responsibility for your life, but you subconsciously don't realise you're doing it, because I would have done that for a long time, and I got pulled on that.
Well, they don't take control.
I got pulled on that, and I was like, no, like, I get advice because they're really good at helping me. And I was like, no, it's because I don't want the responsibility for when shit goes wrong. And that is like do you know, like when you're like, oh,
Stabbed to the fucking heart.
yeah, it's like, oh, you fuckers. I was like, you figured out my whole life. And now I'm like very, I always say this in podcasts, people be sick to death if they've seen me before. I always flip a coin, and then it peer pressures me into making the decision within like 20 seconds. So like, if I can't decide in a main, like whenever I couldn't decide to quit the fire service, I flipped a coin, was heads was quit and tails was stay. Mid flip, I was like, I know what I'm doing. I didn't let the coin decide, it just pressures me. And if I ever can't decide, I do just let the coin decide. But it's just like, there's no right or wrong decision. Just fucking make one and stop dilly-dallying, because I find speed's the main killer.
And the last thing I'd finish this on is that anyone who's not making a decision, you have to realise that is making a decision, because indecision's what fucking kills you and what slows most people down, why most people can't get in shape, most people can't be successful, why most people don't achieve anything.
Yeah, like I love that. I always roll out as well. It's like failure and success are on the same path, and as long as you're walking forward, even if you fall into a pit, you think, oh, well, not making the decision, I'll not fall into the pit. But you have to go into the pit to then get up and go out and continue the path. Whereas if you never go into the pit, you're actually further behind the person that failed, because you're going to feel at some stage you're just procrastinating on it. So yeah, no, that's bang on. That's a good note to finish.
100%. Where can people find out more about you, Tony?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram, just at Tony Mcaleavey. The podcast I do is The Muscle and the Hustle. It's actually zero muscles, zero hustle. It's just mindset and weird talk. So everything. But yeah, that's it. You find me on all platforms, just Tony Mcaleavey. Thank you very much for having me on.
Make sure you check them out, guys. Make sure you enjoyed the show. If you did, please make sure you tag this to your stories. Make sure you subscribe. Drop Tony a follow, and we'll see you next episode soon.